Hello, I'm Teresa. Welcome to my channel. Thank you for joining me here today. Today I'm going to be showing you how you can use alcohol inks, which if you are familiar with alcohol inks, you use those on slick surfaces, things like a coated glossy cardstock and Yupo paper, and today I'm going to be using Yupo paper. But anyone who's familiar with those types of surfaces will know that you can't really use water-based inks on top of those. They don't dry, they just smear and move. So the technique I'm going to use today will show how we can transfer that patterning that we've got on the Yupo paper onto regular cardstock and then go on to use other inks. In today's projects I'm going to be using stencils and distress inks, distress oxide inks, and create some finished projects that look like this. It's a really simple technique that makes nice effective colourful backgrounds. So I'm going to clear these out of the way, get set up, and I'll show you how it's done. I'm going to begin by running through the products that we're using today. On my desk I've got a wipeable non-stick craft mat, just because it's easy to clean up any spillage of the alcohol inks that we're using. And we're going to be using Yupo paper. For those of you not familiar with Yupo, it's a synthetic paper. To all intents and purposes, like a very thin, almost like a plastic. It's perfect for alcohol inks because it allows the alcohol inks to sit on the surface and move. But it can then be tricky to use other sort of stamping ink pads, water-based ink pads such as distress inks, distress oxides, things like that, because they sit on the surface, they don't dry properly, so they can smear or transfer. So the technique that we're going to do today, where we're going to create a background on the Yupo and then transfer it onto a porous paper, we can then go on to use our other ink pads to further embellish this background. I'm going to be transferring my prints just onto this printable white card by Crafter's Companion. I like it. It's a nice bright white. It's very smooth. It doesn't really matter too much what you use. If you have a preference, if you already have a smooth white cardstock in your stash, go ahead and use that. Anything that you would normally stamp or blend inks on, use that. It will be absolutely fine. But this is what I'm using today. I also have a selection of alcohol inks, and these are the Ranger alcohol inks. I've got Limeade, Mermaid, Pistachio, and Cool Perry. I'm going to be using that colour combination for one background. And I've got Coral, Cranberry, Peach Bellini, and Terracotta. I'm going to be using those for a different background. I've also got the Alcohol Lift Ink refill bottle. I have some blending solution. If you don't have blending solution, isopropyl alcohol would do absolutely fine. And I've got one of the Ink Essentials blending handles with a piece of felt on the bottom there. So I'm going to be using those. I've also got a brayer. This is just a rubber brayer. This is what I'm going to apply the lift ink with, and other than that, just a bit of paper towel for cleaning up, wiping up, but that's about it for now to create our alcohol ink backgrounds. Obviously I'm going to work into those using stencils, stamps and other ink pads, but this is what we're going to start off with creating our backgrounds. I've cut the Yupo just a 5 by 7 inch size, just because that's manageable. The white card that I'm transferring it to is slightly larger. I just cut the A4 sheet in half. I'm going to be trimming it anyway from a finished project. And the only other thing that I will possibly use is a heat tool or a hairdryer for maybe just blowing, moving the ink about. It's not essential that you have one of those. I will warn you, if you are using a heat tool, keep it moving, because this Yupo is synthetic. It will warp if you hold the heat in one place for too long. But we're going to begin with our blue and green selection. So once again, Limeade, Mermaid, Pistachio and Cool Perry. I'm going to be using those colours. And I'll just get out the blending solution and the felt applicator as well. And we will go ahead and create our background. So I'm just going to drip on a selection of these inks. And as you can see, they move on the surface of this Yupo quite nicely. you're happy with your background, and this is the great thing with alcohol inks, you can just keep adding and moving the inks until you're satisfied that you like the design you've got. Just let that dry, shouldn't take too long. But where some of the ink might be pooled a little thicker, you just want that to dry off so that it's ready to move on to the transfer section. So what I'm going to do is put that to one side while it's drying and create my second background. So this time I'm using the Coral, Cranberry, Terracotta and Peach Bellini, some nice warm toned inks. Way of adding in some pattern and texture, and I've covered this before in some alcohol ink backgrounds, I'll link to that in the corner if you want to check that out, is to take something like a small ball embossing stylus, or maybe if you've got something like a pearl headed pin, just something with a little bit of surface area that you can dip into some blending solution and then dot onto the alcohol ink to create pattern. So I'm going to pop a little bit of the blending solution just into a palette here and see if I can just add some extra detail by dotting some blending solution onto the Yupo. Set that aside to dry, and I'll bring back my first background and we'll get ready to do the transfer. So I'm going to take my alcohol lift ink and run a line of it along one edge of that Yupo. I'm going to take the brayer and brayer it over the whole surface, and that'll allow that ink to kind of be lifted off the surface of the Yupo. So I'm going to take my piece of card, put it down and rub firmly all over. And when we lift it up, we've transferred that lovely design. Now it has a more, shall I say, watercolour effect on the normal card, simply because it's absorbent and the colour is being absorbed into the fibre rather than sitting on the surface. The original alcohol ink on Yupo is much crisper, but we've got that beautiful variation, that lovely blending and mixing and patterning. So we're going to set that aside to dry, and then I can trim it down a little bit and begin to work on completing the project. And the remains of the ink that are on the Yupo needn't go to waste. There's no reason why we can't use this beautiful sort of ghostly soft remainder of the pattern, we can trim this down and create something using that as well. So I'm just going to wipe my surface down. I'll bring back my second background and we'll transfer the colour onto a piece of card with that one. So we're going to transfer the background in exactly the same way. Going to take the alcohol lift ink, run a line of it down one side, take my brayer and cover the surface. Just give it a moment to just activate that ink. And then transfer the print onto our piece of card. And there we have our beautiful autumnal coloured ink background. Again, still an interesting design, a pale ghostly design left on the Yupo. But we're just going to set these aside to dry, and I'll clean all this area up and trim these down and come back and show you what we can do next. So here are our backgrounds. These are the two that we've transferred onto normal paper. And as I say, we've got this really nice, slightly blurred effect, but you still see that patterning that we got on the Yupo. And then these are the two backgrounds, the ink that was left on the Yupo. And again, I've just trimmed those down and hopefully we'll get round to creating something using those as well. I'm going to begin by using this background here with the blues and greens. And I'm going to add some detail using a stencil and some Distress Oxide inks. So I've chosen peacock feathers and chipped sapphire because I think they'll coordinate quite nicely. And I'm going to be using this stencil here, which is, this is by Lavinia. Lavinia been making stamps for a long time, recently launched some stencils as well. So really happy to be using these. I do have some of their stamps as well. But first of all, I am going to add some detail using this lovely stencil, which I believe is called Coral, I think. Yep, it's called Coral. As you can see, that just adds an extra layer and creates a really nice underwater feel, which is what I want for this one. Very happy with the layering that I've got there. I'm wondering whether to add a little bit of green or whether to leave it. I think I'm going to leave it because I do like the pops of green showing through in the bubbles. So I'm just going to allow that to dry slightly because it's Distress Oxides and they take a little longer to dry. I'm going to wash my stencil off and I'll move on to creating some extra detail on our red background. On our second background, I'm going to be using this stencil. Say another one of the ones from Lavinia, and this one is called Pods. Really like this. Look like leaves, trees, very, very pretty. And I'm going to use Distress ink this time as opposed to Distress Oxide. I'm going to use Fossilized Amber and Crackling Campfire. As you see, again, that's just added some more detail, another layer onto our background. Now I'm going to go around the edge of this one because I've got more white space on this around the edge than I did on the blue background. So I'm going to take a darker brown colour. So I've got Vintage Photo, I'm going to use that, and I'm going to go around the edge and just really get rid of that white that's showing around the edge. There, I'm much happier with that. I didn't like all the white. There's the little bit of white that's showing on the blue and green background. I don't mind. There's a very small amount, and it coordinates better. This I felt was a little bit harsh, so I'm much happier with that now. So again, I'm going to set that aside to dry, clean my mat, go wash my hands, and I shall finish off by adding some stamping, I think. Okay, to finish this card, I'm going to be using 2 stamps from Lavinia. I'm going to use this one, which is called Pink Orbs, and this one, which is Althea. I'm going to stamp the pink orbs around the edge. I'm using VersaFine Clair ink to do this. And I'm just going to create a bit of a border around the edge. I'm going to use my stamping platform to stamp the mermaid, just because I'm probably going to want to stamp her a couple of times to be sure that I've got a nice clean impression of her. I'm just going to decide where I want her. And I'm going to use black ink for this. And actually I think, no, one stamp will do there. I don't need to do that again. So she is really, really pretty. I might add a couple of white highlights just in her hair or on her wings there. We'll see. But I'll just put her to one side while I move on to my second background. I'm going to work on the second background now. I've got this Lavinia Fairy here. I'm not sure what her name is. She's in their older packaging and it doesn't actually have the name on. And I'm probably going to use a couple of these hairs. I'm not sure which yet. So this is Wild Hairs Set Large, and this one here is Pippin Mini. So I'm using the stamp platform again, just in case I say I need to do a second impression with the stamp. Nope, don't need to do a second impression. She's stamped beautifully there. I just want to add some definition for something for her to be standing on. So I'm just going to blend a little bit of ink down there at the bottom. Just going to get my non-stick mat back. And I've just torn the edge of a piece of cardstock. I'm going to place that over there just to mask the area off. And I'm taking the Aged Mahogany Distress ink. I'm just going to blend it over that torn edge. and that just gives the effect that she's sort of standing on something. I can now decide where I want to stamp my hairs. I think I want to sit one down here, quite possibly going to put another one on that side, but I'm just going to stamp those two first because I can't quite get the other stamp in close enough. I think I'm going to use this one. And I think I'm quite happy with that. So I will clean my stamps up and just go on to put these onto some card blanks so that we can see a finished card. So I matted these stamped panels onto some black card, added a little sticker at the top, one of the Tim Holtz Chit Chat stickers, and I used a white gel pen just to add a few highlights onto this one here. Again, this one, just matted it onto some black card, added another Chit Chat sticker at the bottom, and then not forgetting the two backgrounds that we'd got left on the Yupo. This one, just trimmed it down, matted onto some red and gold card, and then stamped and embossed a little holiday seal stamp. Used another one of the holiday seal stamps here. This, if you're interested, is the set from the Stamping Village, and I've used these two stamps at the top. Just stamped that, embossed it, popped on there. And this is a die cut of a holly leaf. This is by Sue Wilson from Creative Expressions, and just added some sparkly gems there. So hope that you've enjoyed today's tutorial, that it's sort of giving you some ideas. If you like using alcohol inks but maybe wanted to be able to blend other types of inks on top and use them on regular paper, that this is a way of transferring some of that nice patterning that you can get onto regular cardstock. And then just a few simple ideas on how to create some cards from your backgrounds. But as always, if you did enjoy this, please leave me a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done already, and I shall be seeing you again soon. Bye.